Hey guys, welcome back to Mobility Monday. This week I want to stay at the hip one more time and take a look at the hamstrings. And the hamstrings, three muscles that make up the posterior thigh, attach up here in the back side of the pelvis and go down just slightly past the knee. So pretty important muscle group. What I want to talk about specifically is a lot of people say that they're tight in the hamstrings. And then when I go ahead and test them, they actually have a lot of range of motion, but it's more of a feeling of tightness and stiffness within the muscles themselves, but not actually being short and restricted to the range of motion. So when you think about just anatomy here, the pelvis, the hamstring and their position, if we're in this this anterior pelvic tilt here, if we have that, think of the hips here are more anteriorly facing downward, and kind of the back is arched, the butt is back, the hamstrings will automatically be in a lengthened position. So typically, the first thing I want to do is make sure the hips are level. And probably a few months ago here, I learned from Kelly Starrett a basic way to have a person and level the hips from a tilt perspective on their own. I try this on a lot of my clients, and it didn't seem to put them even more into that tilted position. Actually, resolve the position pretty well. So what you're going to do here, first thing before we run through any kind of test, because we don't want to go ahead and test for flexibility or any kind of mobility issue. If the hips are out of position, we're going to go ahead and we're just going to see that problem. So we want to level up first to see if that's causing part of the issue. So what we can do here, if you're laying on your back, again, we're going to do 2 times on either side just to try to even out. So first thing, I'm going to dig my right heel into the ground using the hamstring. My left side, I'm going to push up into my hand at the same exact time. So if you think from a kind of a torsion standpoint, I'm using opposite muscles. I'm using the hamstring on my right, I'm using the hip flexors on my left to cause that kind of that tilt or that rotation through the pelvis there, since we have both anominous that can move in opposite directions. So I'm going to hold that about 5-10 seconds. Again, pushing up into my left hand, digging my right heel in using the hamstring, and then relax. I'm going to switch over to the other side and digging my left heel into the ground, pulling up with my right hip flexors. And I can do that several times on both sides. Once I finish that, I'm just going to go into a simple hip bridge. Hold, try to engage through the glutes, make sure abs are squeezing, pulling the ribcage down. I'm going to hold that for 5 to 10 seconds there. So first, making sure that pelvis is in its neutral position. Again, not always perfect. Obviously, we can't always do things ourselves. We might need someone to go ahead and correct that for us. There might be more things going on. But that's a pretty basic drill to do first before testing hamstring length. Next thing, what we need to look at is the difference between flexibility in the hamstring. Do we have enough length? Or is there some kind of stability issue elsewhere that's causing that hip not to be able to get through its full range of motion, which seems like hamstring tightness? So first thing I like to do is what's called the 90-90 straight leg raise. So if we're here in this, so 90 degrees at the hip, 90 degrees at the knee, I'm going to support right behind the hamstring here. So what I'm doing, I'm actually causing and creating stability. I'm holding that leg in place. So there is no stability needed in this position. And then what I'm going to do is just straighten the knee out all the way to see where the knee ends. Again, if I'm stuck in this position here, if I don't get past about 30 degrees to full extension, I know it's a hamstring length issue. So again, flexibility, work on the hamstring is really the best bet right there. But if there is no issue there, and I go here into an active straight leg raise, and I come all the way up, and I notice I can't get up at all. So again, you're able to get all the way up on the first one, you weren't able to get up on the second one, and you're kind of lagging behind here, not able to get up close to that 80-90 degree range, then I know there's some kind of stability issue. So for today, what we're going to look at from more of a flexibility standpoint. So if that hamstring is shortened and restricting range of motion there at the hip and the knee, what we can from a self-myofascial release standpoint with the lacrosse ball, my favorite way to do this, I don't typically like to work on the hamstrings with the foam roller. To me, it really doesn't do much. It's not that effective. So if you have a lacrosse ball and you are in a seated position, you put that lacrosse ball right underneath the hamstring. You're placing your body weight down on it. And all I'm going to do is extend the knee so that if you think of the hamstrings under here, they're going to be sliding against that ball. So I can find any spots that are tight or restricted, and I can go ahead and loosen up that hamstring. So obviously if you were tight on that first test, that 90-90 straight leg raise with the legs supported, go ahead and try to loosen up that hamstring and get some more length through there. So working the entire thing, again, feeling kind of numbs and tingling, be careful there, sciatic nerve travels deeper down underneath that hamstring. From there, again, Again, I don't typically like a lot of the regular hamstring stretches. I like to look at or do the leg raise progression. So if we're here, leg straight up against the wall, so this is going to be the leg that we're working on. I'm going to go actively with this left leg to increase length through the right hip, right hamstring. So here, getting my butt up against the wall, nice and controlled. Both legs are completely lined up, toes facing up towards the ceiling or back this way, but in line at all times. I'm going to lower down. As I lower down, you think of the rotation through the hips here. I'm getting a lengthening through the hamstring on this right side, and then I'm coming back up. So one of my favorite ways to help increase hamstring length, again, we do get some core stability because of this right foot driving into the ground. We're getting that glute and core engaged as we go through. But looking from a specific hamstring perspective, that's a good way to increase some length. So as you go through that, you want to make sure, again, hip position, any kind of rotation, tilts going on, and try to self-correct that yourself, doing a couple reps on both sides, hold 5 to 10 seconds, go through the test, see if it is, are you actually tight and restricted through the hamstring, or is it a stability issue? Again, if you are tight and restricted, self-myofascial release, go through the legs lowering progression there, leg up on the wall, let the other leg fall down, and that will be a good way to help loosen up the hamstring and that posterior hip. All right, thank you guys. Hope you have a good week, and I'll see you next week on Mobility Monday.